here we go. Let me tell you the story and give you some context before we get to the content. So here's what's happening in 1 Kings 18. It's really a story about a prophet, about a king, about a false god, about water, and about fire. Sounds like a crazy Hollywood movie, right? I'm going to unpack the whole thing for you. There's some significant things unfolding in this story. The first thing you need to know before we jump into the content is that we're looking at a land and at a group of people that have been experiencing a drought for 3 years. That means the rain has not fallen on them in any kind of significant measure for 3 years. And they want this to end because the drought is ultimately leading them towards famine, right? They had grain and they had storehouses, but they're running out of all that. And there's even a scene in the text where the king tasks a man named Obadiah to go find water somewhere so that they can water the livestock they have left so that they don't have to start killing the livestock that they wanted to keep. Desperate times are calling for desperate measures. And so there's this king, his name's Ahab. Ahab does not believe in and does not like and does not worship the one true God. He worships this god named Baal. And actually what he's done in order to institute this worship of Baal during this time of famine is that he has killed hundreds of prophets of the one true God. And there's this man, okay, this man in the story, very important. His name is Obadiah. Now here's Obadiah's situation. It's kind of unique. He works for the king, but he believes in and serves the one true God. And so what he's done is he's watched the king, King Ahab, and his wife Jezebel kill all of the prophets of God. And Obadiah realized that he was divinely positioned to save some of these prophets. So he's been hiding them in caves, bringing them what little food and water he could find to give them life, to give them nourishment. And he is trying to keep them alive. But of all these prophets, there's one. He's a radical rebel, and his name is Elijah. And Elijah has a mission and a commission from God. And part of that mission and commission is to prove once and for all that there is only one true God. And that if the people will turn their hearts back to the one true God, he will send water to their land again. Church, listen to me. I think we're living in a time right now with this whole pandemic where God can use this to shake us up so he can wake us up. Come on, listen to me when I tell you this. I'm not saying God calls this. I'm saying he can use this. I'm saying that it's high time for us to turn our hearts back to the one true God. And so when we find ourselves in situations like this throughout the course of history, God gives his people an opportunity to turn away and to turn back to him. And in this story, he's going to use Elijah as a catalyst to do this. And so here's the setup. It's pretty bizarre. I'm just going to warn you that this is not your typical church message, okay? Because what happens is Elijah throws down a challenge with the king and with the prophets of Baal. And here's the challenge. He says, my true God is the only God that can send rain back onto this earth. Y'all can try to do whatever you want to do. You can pray to whoever else you want to pray to. But my God is the only true God. And he is the only one that can send rain back on this land. And in this drought, in this famine, he's the only one that can do it. So I'm gonna dare you to prove me wrong. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get 2 livestock. We're going to take them up on a hill. We're going to have all these people gather around, no COVID, so they didn't have to wear masks and socially distance. We're going to pack everybody in tight. And here's what we're going to do. 450 prophets of Baal are going to go against me. And I'm going to let y'all go first, he says. I'm going to let you start at sunrise. And I'm going to let you pray to your God. And I'm going to let you sacrifice that cow on the altar. And here's the deal. Whichever God can send fire down from heaven, and in turn, after the fire send rain, we will know once and for all who the one true God is. So, prophets of Baal, will you accept the challenge? And the king and the prophets say, yes, we'll accept the challenge. And so this is the scene that we see. They get up on the hill and the prophets of Baal start doing their thing. And their thing gets crazy really quick because it ain't working. Nothing's happening. And they're chanting and they're praying and they're worshiping this false God that will not answer them because he cannot answer them because he is a false God. He is not real. And about lunchtime rolls around and things start to get really intense. They actually start cutting themselves. They're trying to sacrifice their own bodies to get the attention of their gods. Now, you might be wondering, what is the prophet Elijah doing all of this? It's fascinating what he's doing. He is talking trash to the prophets of Baal like Drake talks trash courtside at a Raptors game. That's what he's doing. He is just talking all kinds of trash to them. He's like, y'all might need to get a little louder. Your God can't hear you. 450 of you, but he still can't hear you. What y'all doing? You tired yet? You want to take a break yet? And eventually, the trash talk and the constant yelling, screaming, and praying to a God that is not responding wears them out. And they're like, all right, Elijah, it's your turn. It's your turn. So set the scene. They started at about sunrise. We're in the middle of the day right now. The prophets of Baal need a lunch break, but they don't have a lot of lunch to eat. And so they sit with all the other spectators and they watch Elijah do this. We're going to start in verse 32. Elijah took the 12 stones and he constructed an altar in honor of the Eternal One. And he carved a ditch out around it, large enough to hold 13 quarts of seed. That's important. I'll tell you why later. He set up the wood, chopped up the bull, and placed it on top of the wood. And Elijah said to the people, listen to this, go get 4 big jars and fill them all up with water. Then pour the water out over the burnt offering and the wood. Side note, Elijah's just getting ready to show off for God. He's telling them to take water and to pour it on an offering, but remember that the whole goal of the offering was that fire was going to come down from heaven. In other words, Elijah's saying, I'm going to extinguish the fire before it even starts to show you that when the fire still comes, my God's the only one true God. I'm going to actually create every possible reason for this not to work so that you know once and for all that it still will work. Verse 34, now do the same thing again. And so they did it a second time. They get more water. And then Elijah says, all right, now do the same thing a third time. And so they did it a third time. The water covered the altar and even filled up the ditch, that ditch that would hold 13 quarts of seed. And when it was time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah called out to the Eternal. And Elijah said, praying, Eternal One, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, reveal yourself on this day as Israel's God. Make it known that I serve you and have done all this because you commanded it of me. Answer me, Eternal One. Reveal yourself so that everyone here will know that you, Eternal One, are the true God, the only God. Do it so that everyone knows you are turning the gaze of their hearts back to you again. Right then, the Eternal One's fire landed upon the altar. The flames consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the ground. The flames even drank up all the water in the ditch. When everyone witnessed this extraordinary power, they all put their faces to the ground in fear, in awe, and in wonder. I've entitled this sermon today, Out of Water. If you're taking notes today, I want you to write that down, out of water. Let me tell you a little bit about our Center Point Church story. Because we found ourselves at a similar place that you find yourselves right now, almost 5 years ago. God had put an opportunity in front of us to have our first permanent home. And here's the truth. We didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. We didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. We didn't even know for sure that it was all going to work out. But we believed that God was going to open doors, and we wanted to, as a church, be prepared to walk through whatever doors he opened. Church, one of the most important things we can do when we're following Jesus is prepare our hearts for the miracle we know he wants to do. We're all waiting for him to do the miracle. He's waiting for us to prepare our hearts first. And so we entered into this season where people gave to vision, a vision they couldn't even see yet. We didn't even know what the building was. We really didn't know. We just had some opportunities and we had some ideas, and we felt like if we started taking steps, God would meet us in the middle of those steps, and that's exactly what happened. He made a way where it seemed like there was no way in the middle of a crazy situation. And you know what? The interesting thing is, as Pastor Wayne and I have talked about how he leads in a city like this and how we lead in Little Chillicothe, Ohio, you would think they're totally different, but in many ways they're similar. Right here, Y'all have a hard time finding buildings because they're crazy expensive. For us, we have a hard time finding buildings because there's not many of them that exist. It's a similar challenge either way you look at it. Because when something does open up, what do you got to be ready to do, Pastor Wayne? Move, right? In faith, we're going to go, we're going to trust, we're going to step, we're going to believe. And here's the thing, we had this crazy audacious goal to raise $750,000. That was our goal. And can I tell you something? We hired an expert to come in and help us figure out how to do it. And he told us our goal was too big. He looked at me in a conference room, and he said, your goal is too big. You need to scale that back about $150,000. And I said, listen, Brad, who I just paid a lot of money to tell me that my vision's too big. Listen, God told me $750,000. So if you want to argue with God, you can argue with God. But I'm just telling you what God told me we were supposed to raise. It was $750,000. He's like, man, y'all don't even have a building and pictures to show people yet. You crazy. Don't blame me for this when you don't raise the money. I said, that's all right. I won't blame you. I know the number God put on my heart to raise. And can I tell you something to encourage you? Over those next several years, we watched people give to vision and to vision alone. Why? Because their heart and their life was being changed through what God was doing in our house, and they couldn't help but step out and give generously so that other people around them could experience the same life-changing, liberating love they were experiencing. Put it to you like this. If Jesus has shown up in your life and he's changed you from the inside out, you cannot keep it to yourself. And we watch people give and give and give. And can I tell y'all something? When it was all said and done, we didn't raise $600,000. We didn't raise $750,000. We raised over $820,000 because people gave generously. I need you to know some things about your pastors. I need you to know some things about this church that make this church really special. I need you to know that we believe at this church that God still keeps his promises. You need to understand that your pastors believe that they lead like that they live like that. You need to know that we believe God still does miracles. Miracles aren't something that God did back then. There's something that he still wants to do today. And actually, Jesus tells us that through the gift of the Holy Spirit, he wants to empower us and enable us to do even greater things than he did. This is so important. You need to know that we believe at this church that generosity paves the way for God to do those miracles. Listen, the Life Church New York, listen to me. You are in the middle of a miracle and you don't even realize it. When you're in the middle of the miracle, you take the miracle for granted. You understand that a church like this, in a place like this, is not supposed to work. Y'all understand that, right? Y'all understand that it's by God's grace and your obedient pastors and leaders at this church that more miracles continue to happen. You understand this, right? You are in the middle of a church where people are meeting Jesus every week. You are in the middle of a church where marriages have been healed and restored. You are in the middle of a church where we've got people in the room that are singles and they're realizing their identity is not found in a significant other person. It's found in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. There are captives being set free at this church, and you're in the middle of a miracle. And I came from Chillicothe, Ohio, just to make sure you don't miss the middle of the miracle that you're standing in today. It's something special. It's something significant, and you don't want to take it for granted. And yet God has always been in the business of stepping in when we step out. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. People say things like, God feels far away. God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's not the one that moved. You are. James 4:8 says, draw close to God, he'll draw close to you. You know what that really means? It means God's been standing in the same place the whole time, but if you take a step towards God, you'll get closer. He'll get closer to you because he's right there where you left him. And so when we step out, he steps in. I need you to know that this morning. I need you to know that miracles require steps. Let me translate that thought to something even simpler. I can't get where God has me going if I stay where I am. Do you know what gets in the way of our calling? Complacency and comfort. I'm comfortable with the way things have always been. Why do I need to give generously when I already experienced the love of Jesus right here? Like this. I don't need to get, people can meet Jesus here. Oh, they can, and they will, but God has so much more in store. And when you step out, he's going to step in. So if you want to get where God has you going, you can't stay where you are. I love this verse in 1 Kings 18:1. This was the beginning of the story. We didn't read this. I want to back up and share this with you. God says to Elijah at the beginning of this text, go now and reveal yourself to Ahab. When you do, I will bring rain to the earth. Let's recap what King Ahab has done so far. He has killed every prophet of God like Elijah that he can find. His wife Jezebel has been even more determined to kill the prophets of God. So in other words, God shows up. Elijah's having his quiet time with his espresso in the morning, just connecting with God. And God says, here's the plan to get some rain back. You need to go to the king that wants to kill you, and you need to throw down a challenge with the prophets of Baal. Y'all ever had God tell you something you're like, no. God, that cannot be what you're thinking. That cannot be what you said. It's actually interesting what Elijah does. You want to know what he does? I love how he kind of works through the situation. He goes and finds Obadiah, who he knows. And he says, hey, Obadiah, I need you to relay this message first, brother. Can you go tell the king that I want to have a conversation with him first? And then Elijah talks to him, but he kind of preps the scene first. He kind of tests the waters first with somebody that he knew wouldn't get killed by King Ahab. And so God says, go find this person that wants to kill you and challenge him. Y'all, that's crazier than walking around without a mask in New York City right now. That's crazy. That's just crazy. But God's crazy. Come on, I said God's crazy. Y'all know we serve a crazy God, right? Here's the thing. There are these moments where faith will look like fear. God says, I'm asking you to do something that takes faith, and we get fearful about it because it doesn't make sense. You know what doesn't make sense? Giving generously during a pandemic. Let's be honest with you, it doesn't make sense. Some of us might get fearful about it. God says, yeah, but you're saying it's fear. I'm telling you it's faith. I'm telling you that if you step out, I'm going to step into the situation. I'm telling you that I'm going to do something that only I could do. I say it to you like this. God wants to see if we're willing to step before he's willing to bless. You got to take a step if you want him to bless. So we got to remember that miracles require steps. And I need you also to know that steps require sacrifice. Steps always require sacrifice. It's not a step of faith if sacrifice isn't involved. Y'all heard your pastor this morning, right? Sacrifice is part of generosity. When you take a step, it requires sacrifice. Part of submitting to God is about making a sacrifice for God. And so in 1 Kings 18:33, we see Elijah give these interesting instructions. Go get 4 big jars and fill them up with water. Then pour the water out over the burnt offering and the wood. What? Did y'all miss the detail that they're in the middle of a drought? Let me give you a geography lesson. Where they're at on the mountain, having this ceremony, the closest body of water, if there was any, was a half day's walk away. Where did they get the water from? I can tell you where they got the water from. The people that were gathered to watch this event. In other words, the people that had made journeys for hours, a day, maybe 2 days to come on top of this mountain, they took what little water they had for the journey. They would have had to. It was hot. They couldn't travel this length without having something. So Elijah asks them to give, get this, something they did not feel like they had enough of. I need you to give me the water, Elijah said. And then I love this part. You probably missed this detail. He had to ask them 3 times to give more water. In other words, brother took up 3 offerings in the same service. He had them bring the water, and then he looked, and they counted, and they were like, it's not enough. Go take up another offering. And so they went back, and they took up another offering. They were like, it's still not enough. Go take, somebody still holding on to some water up in here. Go get some more water. So they took up an offering the third time, and then they got enough water, and then they got their miracle. Or did they? Because there's something else we probably missed in the story. We get real enamored with the fire coming down from heaven, burning up the offering, the stones, the ground. The people bow down. Oh, we've lost our focus. We got to go back to the one true God. Newsflash, it's still not raining yet. People start going home. It's still not raining yet. You know, husband and wives be arguing with each other. Like the husband's like, I told you, how are we supposed to, we not got no water to get home. You gave it away to the crazy preacher prophet man. What are you doing? She's like, God told us to do it. I don't care what God said. I need some water to drink right now. We got another half day's walk. We're going to be walking at night. The coyotes are going to be eating us. We don't even have water to offer to them to keep them off of us. What's wrong with you? People are probably grumbling, right? You got people that were like, well, man, I was ready to Instagram the rain, but it hadn't come yet. Where's the rain at? We gave the water. The fire thing was really cool, but we didn't just show up for the fire. We showed up for the rain. They made a sacrifice, and the sacrifice hurt. Listen to me. If it doesn't hurt a little, you're not sacrificing much. Let that step on your toes if it needs to step on your toes. I've let that reality step on my toes more times than I care to admit. There have been so many times in our life and marriage with each other, Kristen and I, where we feel like God's told us to do something, and it's just crazy stupid what he told us to do. And you try to rationalize it, right? No, I need to do something that hurts a little less because we got this going on, we got that coming up, we got this plan. But if it doesn't hurt a little, you're not sacrificing much. The people in this story sacrificed a lot. Somebody probably hoarded some water, and they were thinking on the way home, oh man, I'm the only smart one in the group. Everybody else gave their water to this crazy dude, and I'm the only one going home with anything to drink. Miracles require steps. Steps require sacrifice. I want to share one more thought with you. Sacrifice takes faith. Even when I can't see him working, I have to keep believing. Church, God doesn't always answer our prayers in our time. He doesn't always do it the way that we want him to do it. And the story's not over yet. Because everybody's going home and everybody's returned. And we go to verse 41 through 45 and we see Elijah talking to his servant. And he says this in verse 43, go now and look in the direction of the sea. And the servant returns to Elijah. I did as you asked, and there is nothing in the direction of the sea. Elijah gave him the same instruction 7 times. Go back and look in the direction of the sea. Go back and look. Go back and look. Go back and look. Go back and look. I think by about time number 7 of that trip, brother's getting on monster.com and looking for a new job, somebody. He's like, this dude is crazy. He's having me go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then listen, the 7th time. I love this. Verse 44. The servant did as Elijah requested each time. And on the 7th time, he told Elijah, listen, a minuscule cloud as tiny as the hand of a man is ascending from the sea. I've got a theory on this verse, Pastor Wayne. Let me share my theory with you. It might not be theologically accurate and correct. I'm going to share it anyway. I think the servant made it up. I think he was tired. I mean, he gave like the smallest thing. I see a cloud as tiny as a man's hand. In other words, if Elijah says, I don't see it, he can be like, squint a little harder. You see it now? I'm telling you it's there. He picked the smallest thing he could think of. I mean, a cloud this big, that ain't even a cloud. I think he made it up just to be done with this nonsense of running back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then Elijah does this. Just when brother thinks he's done running back and forth, Elijah says, go quickly and give a message to Ahab for me. Remember, Ahab's the king that wants Elijah dead. And if he didn't want him dead before, he really wants him dead now. He just showed up 450 prophets of Baal on the altar and on the mountain. He says, tell Ahab, prepare your chariot and leave quickly before the rain gets torrential and keeps you from traveling. And his servant's like, you want me to do what? Maybe you missed it. Now he's feeling bad that he lied, right? I told you the cloud was only as big as a man's hand. You sure you want me to be the one? You don't want to go tell the king? No, I want you to go tell the king. Just trust me, tell the king to get his chariot ready because the rain's about to get for real. And he doesn't have four-wheel drive up in that chariot. He's going to get stuck in the mud. Tell him to go back quick. And then in verse 45, it says, the sky became filled with dark, monstrous clouds. The wind grew wild, the heavy rain fell, and Ahab traveled quickly in his chariot to Jezreel. The rain came. The rain came because people gave. The miracle happened because people sacrificed. They were willing to understand that when I say I have faith, it's not good enough just to say I have faith. I have to live my life with action that says I'm putting my faith in Jesus. They gave what they did not have. That is called irrational generosity. But actually, there's another word for it. It's just called generosity because you cannot rationalize generosity. Generosity does not make sense. It does not make sense to step into a building during the middle of a pandemic until you realize that there's a hurting, dying world that needs Jesus more than they've ever needed Jesus. It does not make sense to give sacrificially in a season of uncertainty. Except you can't rationalize generosity. It takes faith. So you step out and you say, yes, God, I'm going to give generously even though it doesn't make sense. And so people just kept bringing their water. And they kept bringing their water. And you know what I think one of the biggest lies the devil tells us when he calls us to step out and give and do something sacrificially? He tells us that our gift isn't enough and it doesn't matter. He's lying to some of you in the room and watching online about that this morning. Well, you don't know what I have to give. It would not even move the meter. Oh, don't believe that lie of the enemy. Because can I tell you something? How this whole thing works, how miracles happen, how God-sized vision becomes a reality is that when I take and when you take are just enough and we all give it together, God turns it into more than enough. That's how biblical generosity and multiplication works. You could even say it like this. It's multiplication through subtraction. I'm going to subtract from what I have, but together, God's going to take what all of us give and He's going to multiply it, and He's going to use it to do exceedingly abundantly above anything we can ask or think. That's what God's going to do. That's who we serve. See, I came here to make sure you know that when you're out of water, you're ready for a miracle. I know it might feel like you're out of water right now. I know we're living in uncertain times. I know none of us know what tomorrow holds, but we know who holds tomorrow. And so it might feel like I'm out of water. But when I'm out of water, I'm ready for a miracle. Because when God brings that miracle to pass, guess what? Not a single individual is going to be able to take credit for it in and of themselves. It's all of us together stepping out so that He can step in. I want to close with this thought. In John 2, Jesus performs His first miracle. And the miracle is turning water into wine. Most of you are probably familiar with the story. Even those of you that might be newer to this church thing, you probably heard about Jesus' first miracle. He's at a wedding, they run out of wine, He makes more wine. There's a detail in the story that's so easy to overlook. And I want you to lean into this morning. When Jesus decides to perform this miracle, He has servants that have to haul these big clay pots down a hill to the water to fill the pots with water, and then they have to haul them back up the hill. It was hard work. They had to do it more than once. Here's what's crazy. Jesus looks at these pots that are filled with water. They're not wine yet. And He tells the servants, go serve it to the taste tester. Serve it to the person in charge of the feast. They're looking down to the pot. They're like, it's still water. And you should have seen that river. We don't even know how clean it was. But we know that it's water. And Jesus says, take it. take it anyway. So they take it. And then, as he dips the cup into the pot, the water turns into wine. Do you know who got to see the miracle? The servants. The people that sacrificed. Don't miss this. Not the royal guests. Not everybody else who thought they would have been worthy to see Jesus' first miracle, who would have crowded around to see it. No, the servants that sacrificed and walked down to the water, filled up the pot, hauled it back up the hill. They got to see the miracle. I know what some of you are thinking, yeah, but everybody got to experience the miracle. Listen, a lot of people will get to experience what the Life Church New York does, but the servants are going to get to see the miracle at work. You're going to get to see the water turn into wine. You're going to get to see the dream become a reality. You're going to get to see your family and your friends who are far from Jesus that are going to walk into this new place you're going to call home, and they're going to bow their knee at the altar, raise their hands and say, yes, Jesus, I give you my life. I give you my heart. That's why we give generously. That's why we step out so that he can step in. That's why we sacrifice and trust him with everything we have and everything we are. When you're out of water, you're ready for a miracle. I believe that growing requires stepping. And I believe there are many of you in the room watching online today. God's calling you to take a step. And I just want to pray that you'll have the boldness to take it. Right? I know your pastors. I know what their ask has been. They've just asked you to pray and be obedient to what God puts on your heart. No more, no less. So whatever that is, I'm going to ask you to step out and watch God step in and do what only he can do. There are others of you in the room, others of you watching today, and you might be like, man, this is great. I love this. My heart's not right with Jesus. And you know that. Maybe you've never said yes to Jesus. Maybe you said yes at one point. You did the church thing, but you ran far, far away from it. Jesus is not at the center of your life, and you know it. Whether it's for the first time or whether you're like that prodigal son or daughter that just needs to run home today, I want to give you an opportunity to say yes to Jesus here, now, today. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to have an opportunity to have a fresh start with Jesus. And I'm going to pray a prayer. And I just want you to repeat this prayer out loud after me. Even if you've already said it, I want you to speak it as a confession of what you believe and know to be true, and as a benefit for the people that might be around you today, or that might be saying this prayer for the very first time. It's going to give them confidence to pray this prayer together. So would you bow your heads right now? Would you close your eyes, and would you repeat this prayer out loud after me? Say, Jesus, I love you. I thank you for loving me. I thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I ask forgiveness for my sin. I ask forgiveness for my mistakes. Come into my life. Make me new. Do what only you can do. I give you everything I have. I give you everything I am. I give you everything I hope to be. I give you all of me today.